What's up, guys? It is Dr. Seth, and we are back with another round of answering your questions from my Instagram AMA. And we might as well start out with one that I feel a little bit insulted by. So, question number one: why you so purple when you lift? And I mean, look at me sitting here right now. I am a chubby little pale skinned, rosy cheeked white boy. What color do you expect that I'm going to turn when I put 800 pounds on my back? It's just something that has always happened, no matter how heavy I am, no matter where blood pressure's at, I always turn purple when I strain. And I really do think that it is just a part of who I am and how I'm always going to look under the bar. It's just always happened. It's me. Sorry that I turn purple when I lift, but I don't think there is anything that I can do to change it. And on that note, I often do get blood pressure comments. And the thing is, I check my blood pressure very regularly. It's always spotless. I do a lot of cardio. I go for a lot of walks. I make sure that even at being at this advanced body weight, I'm as healthy as I can be. So I definitely am not afraid of turning purple. It's just something that happens because of my overall complexion. And we've got a couple of deadlift questions coming up. So question number two: any methods to stop overselling a mixed grip deadlift at lockout? And this is something pretty common that you see in newer lifters. They're going to finish their deadlift and they're going to lean way back, get way behind the bar. And the problem with leaning way back at lockout on a deadlift is that it makes it very easy to rebend the knees and then get called for soft knees. So it's something that we definitely don't want to be doing, and it's a habit that we want to break relatively early. And I think the reason that this starts for a lot of lifters is that a very prevalent cue on the interwebs is that you want to lean back as you're pulling. And if you're just trying to lean back, it makes it very, very, very easy to over lean back at the top. And more often than not, the solution is literally to tell the lifter, quit leaning back, just stand straight up. That's it. That's all. And if that doesn't work, if just not trying to lean back isn't doing the trick, then what I'll try to tell them to do is focus on, instead of trying to pull back, focus on just locking their quads and locking their glutes as hard as they can. Because if they're trying to lock their quads, lock the knees as hard as they can, they're not going to be able to double bend the knees. And then if all they think about after that is squeezing the glutes hard, they're going to get to that straight up position. And if we just cut out the lean back entirely from the equation, they shouldn't have that over lean back at the top. And on that note, question number three: push with heels in conventional. And this is another very common cue on the internet, but like any cue, we need to think about who this cue is addressed towards and what this cue is trying to accomplish. Now, if you go into any commercial gym and you see a random guy just trying to deadlift for the third time in his life, odds are that he might be way up on his toes, he might be way over the bar, and it might look really freaking ugly. Now that guy, if he's up on his toes, if he's falling forward, he might need to put more weight onto their heels, but most powerlifters that are at a decent level, they don't need to be thinking about pushing through their heels because they're already driving through the midfoot relatively well. They just need to think about driving through their midfoot better. And if you don't have a problem with going up on your toes, if you don't have a problem with falling forward at the top, you probably don't need to be thinking about putting more weight on your heels. Now, with how I coach, with what I'm trying to accomplish with a lot of my lifters, I'm actually trying to get them to put more quads into their initial push off the floor. And if you want to get more quads into the initial push off the floor, I'm actually going to get them to bias weight to their forefoot. And this could be a problem if we're giving that cue to someone who is already on their toes and we're trying to tell them to put more weight on their toes. That's probably not going to pan out well. But if we're having someone who struggles with getting quads into the initial push, putting more weight on the toes can be beneficial. So in general, we want to be pushing through the midfoot primarily. We want a relatively even load distribution, but if we want to bias things more to the quads, we can push through the toes harder to potentially get better leg drive. If we have plenty of leg drive and we're falling forward, we might need to bias things slightly towards the heels from where we are to have a more balanced pull. So where we're putting foot pressure and where we're biasing foot pressure really depends on how the pull looks and what the lifter needs. And for question four, we are moving on to bench press. What are good bench variations for someone stuck pressing off the chest, but lockout is good? So most of the time when someone has a bottom end miss, in general, we can usually just say that they straight up need to get stronger. Now, depending on what that miss looks like, it might be the strength side, it might be the technical side. And if we're looking at bench technique that can lead to a bottom end miss, it is often going to be related to their upper back strength and ability to hold position in that bottom end with heavy weights. So what I like to do to support that is any sort of row variation that allows us to pull into our bench groove and pull the chest up high. And in doing that row with that intent, we can better learn to pull the chest up and meet the bar in a more stable position so we have a more stable foundation to press from. And we're thinking about upper back involvement in the bench. I'm not one of the guys that's going to try to tell you that the lats are really moving the weight. Now, in some cases, the lats kind of can help with the initial pop out of the bottom if the arm is behind the plane of the rib cage, but the majority of the time, I am training lats in bench to help hold the rib cage up. Because when we're pressing the bar, the pecs are attached to the rib cage, the pecs are attached to the arm. As the pecs transfer force from the rib cage to the arm, it's going to be pushing the rib cage down. So if the rib cage is falling as the pecs are pushing, that is going to reduce our ability to transfer force to the bar in the bottom. If we have the upper back engaged to keep the upper back tall, we can then transfer better force to the barbell. Now, the other side of that and getting it to transfer over to the bench, which will also help with the strength side, is if we were to get that lifter to run long pause presses or very low spoto presses with a long pause, spending time in that long paused position can get them more used to creating that tension and then can get them used to driving out from that bottom end that we're exposing for a longer duration. In addition to that, running a shit ton of heavy dumbbell presses, making sure that we're not the asshole that's cheating and bringing the dumbbells narrow and basically doing like a 3-board with a dumbbell, really trying to get opened up, really trying to get deep with the dumbbells and pushing out of that can also help build up that bottom end strength. And for question number 5, just so that we're not ignoring squats, tips to teach how to use abs on a squat. And this is going to come back to the pull cue that you'll often hear Miana shouting at me when I am squatting. And I'd say that pull is the most important thought that I can have once I initiate a squat, because if I execute on that cue well, everything else just falls into place. And what that pull cue, what the intent behind it is I'm trying to pull the bar into my upper back, I'm trying to pull my rib cage down against my erectors, and I'm trying to pull with the hip flexors and lower abs into the hole. And the first time that I heard this was a old Mark Bell video in like 2013 when Stan Efferding was talking about what he thinks about in a squat, and he was expressing that he is literally just trying to use the front side of his body to pull him into more tension on the backside. And if you can pull into more tension on the backside, you can then create more force with that backside on the concentric. And in terms of teaching a lifter how to feel that, teaching a lifter how to do that, one of my favorite ways to learn that sensation and learn that pull is with a cable reverse squat. So attaching cables to the ankle and then pulling the knees to the chest in a slow, controlled manner can teach you what that pull on the eccentric of your squat should feel like. And if you can dial that in, that should help lock your hip flexors to your abs, get everything nice and tight to support your brace, and then it should help you with having a more solid hole and a more powerful concentric. And for question number 6, let's get into some programming strategy stuff. Planned versus unplanned deloads. How to know when/if to take a deload. Now, across my roster, I have some lifters where we do schedule and plan deloads at regular intervals. I have other lifters where they're like 2 or 3 years straight without taking a true deload other than the week before meet and the post-meet feel better phase that we run. Now, the lifters that we don't really deload, they have 2 tendencies. Number 1, they don't get hit quite as hard by fatigue. And number 2, when they are fatigued, they're very good at auto-regulating their output based on what their fatigue is giving them. And what their deloads tend to look like is that we will have a bit of a ramp-up phase in training, and then when we know their fatigue is coming, we'll kind of account for that in the intent of the week. We won't necessarily modify intensity all that much, but we'll go into the week expecting to feel fatigued. We'll still hit relatively high RPEs, but with those high RPEs, they're going to be regulated down because of the fatigue. And as long as they stick to the RPE cap, as long as they aren't trying to force it, that fatigue limiting their output will act as enough of a deload that they're going to be freshened up to enter into a new wave where we can climb until they hit hit that fatigue state again. We regulate based on RPE, and then they're able to just climb and kind of repeat that cycle over and over again and make continued progress without getting overly burnt out. Now, when that doesn't work though, is if we have a lifter that when they accumulate fatigue, they totally fall flat on their face and then they feel like shit, their output goes to complete garbage. And then with that lifter, I will track the rate at which they do accumulate fatigue. We will then decide to, instead of forcing them through a week where things feel like shit, we'll just pull back and then allow them to have that pullback as their reset rather than having a relatively high RPE week that's limited by fatigue. And in terms of like knowing when to do that, all you have to do is pay attention to how your lifter or how your own training is waving, and you'll know that like you'll have a certain amount of weeks where you can climb, and then you'll have a week where you fall flat on your face. And during that fall flat on your face week, we just want to plan that as the week that we take our deload, and we should be able to make relatively regular cycles based around that fatigue accumulation schedule, as long as like the training progression stays relatively consistent through the wave structure. If you're changing how waves are structured, if you're changing how quickly intensity accumulates or how intense week one is, you might need to change the schedule on which you're deloading. But again, that's something that you'll want to pay attention to with performance, with how you're feeling, and then you can kind of base your planned deload schedule around that. Now, the problem with planned deloads is, like I kind of alluded to, it's not always going to be perfect, and sometimes you may need to adjust on the fly. So what I tell lifters is, no matter what, if they're entering into a training cycle and they feel like they're going to die and they can't figure it out through the warm-ups and things just feel like crap, just pull the I'm taking a light day card, take a light day. We'll be able to reset and readjust training based around how they're feeling for the rest of the week to kind of let them freshen up and enter into a new wave of training. And for the last question of the day, what would have been wrong with taking 6 months off of pressing to actually let your pec heal? Well, Mr. Private Account, Anonymous, no posts, no followers, here's the thing. Look at me. Look at what I'm doing. Look at how well my pec is working in training. Do you really think that it has not healed very well? Do you really think that what I have done has been any amount of detrimental to the overall picture of my training career? Because here's the thing. My goal with this pec comeback was to be aggressive with it. And the reason I wanted to be aggressive with it was so that I could show everyone that acted like this was going to be a career ender for me, to show everyone that acted like I would never bench press a PR again. I wanted to show them how freaking stupid they are. So here's the deal. I'm going to keep on rehabbing the shit out of this pec. I'm going to keep on making it work very well. It's going to keep on getting better. And within, another 6 months, people aren't even going to realize that it ever happened. And the biggest reason I want to do that is in the rehab world, there are so many rehab professionals that want to act like getting hurt is the absolute worst thing in the world and that it's going to ruin everything you've tried to do as a lifter. And the thing is, getting hurt isn't fun. Getting hurt obviously will set you back, but it isn't as big of a deal as so many people think it is if you are able to rehab well. And yes, I was aggressive with my pacing, but again, I was in the pocket the whole time. I'm still staying in the pocket. I'm not pushing it faster than what my body is giving me. And even though I have had some frustrating weeks and I have had some bad sessions, I am no worse off for it. And I truly do believe that long-term big picture of my career, this pec is going to come back better because of how I went about it. And going about it the way that I have, I would never push anyone else as hard as I'm pushing myself, because I do understand that pushing this hard does carry some risks. But again, I want to lead by example. I want to show people how well an injury can be come back from, and I just want to be able to do things that people think is impossible. So if you think that I'm stupid for how I'm rehabbing this pec, good. I don't want to work with you anyways. I don't want to talk to you anyways. I don't want to be your friend. So go ahead and press unfollow Mr. Anonymous. So I guess, guys, that is what I got for today. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions. Appreciate the heck out of all you. And as always, if you submitted a question and it did not get answered, like the 17 elbow questions I had today, go watch the rest of the channel. It's likely that those questions were already covered in depth, either in other AMAs or in standalone videos. So that's what I got. As always, this series is sponsored by my upcoming Make Conjugate Work for Raw Powerlifting lecture series. We're going to get really in depth into the ins and outs of programming conjugate, the ins and outs of how to deload, whether it is a fatigue washing strategy like I employ with some of my lifters, or whether we are planning deloads. That will be covered very in depth. So go check that out if you want to become a better coach and a lifter. And on that note, peace out. Have a good rest of your night.